for our reaction. We got a rock star panel tonight. We got Reince Priebus, former White House Chief of Staff and former RNC Chair, Byron York, Washington Examiner, Chief Political Correspondent, Fox News contributor, and Dennis Kucinich, former Democratic Congressman and 2008 presidential candidate. Harmeet Dhillon is with us, civil rights attorney, Trump 2020 advisory board member. Reince, let's start with you. What are President Trump and his allies thinking tonight, watching what happened in this second Democrat debate?
Well, as I was watching it, I thought there were two winners tonight. Number one, President Trump, very clearly, because, number one, the Democrats are debating throwing off 200 million people off their private insurance. They're trashing Barack Obama. They're talking about Medicare for all, another $32 trillion. And the second winner is Joe Biden, because one thing I learned in 2016 is that when it was all Trump all the time, no matter good, bad, in the middle, Trump always won in that battle. Tonight was all about Joe Biden, constantly attacking him 9-on-1. It was all about Biden. He's plus 20 going into the debate. If anything, he was helped by the debate, and I think ultimately it was a good night for him and a great night for the president.
Byron, what stood out when I watched this thing was, my goodness, if Barack Obama showed up on stage, he would be one of the more conservative people on that stage, and they'd have to attack him standing right there. This was amazing to see, the party of doom and gloom. Pretty much everyone was doom and gloom, except Biden, who I think was saying, elect me and we're going to do Obama 3.0.
He does. I mean, look, he has always been the candidate of restoration. I mean, there are other candidates of transformation. He's the candidate of restoration. But, you know, watching this, I think, if you are a Democrat and you truly think the House is on fire, that we're in a big emergency because of Donald Trump, this debate started out with 40 minutes of arcane discussion of health care, in which they did discuss whether or not to take away people's private insurance, came to no particular conclusion, and nobody gave that sense of emergency that the Democratic base is feeling. They weren't seeing it in their candidates.
Dennis Kucinich, you've argued a lot of these issues in the past, that you have to take on the big dogs in your party in order to be a transformational candidate. But tonight, it was an odd thing to watch because, again, Barack Obama was two-term president, extremely popular, global superstar, but pretty much all of them were hitting Obama without necessarily saying it. Obamacare, trade deals, they did it last night, too. And then Biden's there saying, whoa, wait a second. That was a party of hope and change.
Well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, I think we have to acknowledge that some of the deficiencies of the Obama administration created the opening for Donald Trump. Now, as far as health care, there is a real divide among Democrats on health care, and there has been for decades. In 2000, I went to the Democratic Platform Committee to present Medicare for all, and it was shot down by the Gore campaign. And the support for Medicare for all is growing. You wouldn't know it by tonight's debate, but you would certainly know it from yesterday's with Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, we had Delaney, though. I think John Delaney, the only one with business experience other than Andrew Yang, said, look, I ran 2 healthcare companies. Medicare pays for 80% of what doctors actually need to cover their costs. Medicare for all will crater what is already going to crater, which is Medicare. But the problem here is we got Biden and Kamala Harris. Harmeet, I want you to come on, get in on this. They're mixing it up at the very beginning of this debate over this Medicare for all conversation. It's hard to follow for most people who don't know the issues. This is how it went down.
Vice President Biden's campaign calls your plan, quote, a have it every which way approach, and says it's just part of a confusing pattern of equivocating about your health care stance. What do you say to that?
Well, they're probably confused because they've not read it.
Anytime someone tells you you're going to get something good in 10 years, you should wonder why it takes 10 years. It will require middle-class taxes to go up, not down.
The cost of doing nothing is far too expensive.
Did Joe Biden win that exchange, Harmeet?
Well, I think he pointed out that Kamala Harris is all over the place. He could have done a better job. He could have pointed out that actually yesterday Bernie said that his plan, which Kamala Harris has previously endorsed and I think even co-sponsored, eliminates private health care altogether. He just came out and said it and owned it. Kamala Harris's problem, as I wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed a little while ago, is that she's flip-flopped on every single major issue. She wants to have it all of the different ways. And after that, like 20, 30 minutes of discussion and her having 5 times the airtime of any of the other candidates, she still wouldn't say how much it's going to cost and what it really accomplishes. So I do think that Biden did a better job there in that exchange than Kamala Harris.
I would have to agree, and that Senator Harris has been all over the map. Her proposal on so-called Medicare for all really isn't. It looks like a duck, but it quacks like an insurance company.
Okay, Reince, the most devastating blow to Harris, again, who was built up much like Beto O'Rourke was built up and Buttigieg was built up, and then it was Harris, and each candidate would build them up. But she's been built up for weeks and weeks and weeks. So this was another moment for her to shine. This was the most devastating blow to her. Watch.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Wow. And she basically answered, no, that's not true. But she never really told us why that wasn't true. And I don't know who's going to fact check Kamala Harris. That might work in general for Kamala Harris. She's tough on crime. But in this primary, in this temperature, does that work?
It doesn't work. You can't have it both ways. But also, you know, these candidates that are not Kamala Harris and not Joe Biden, they're pre-preparing for these attacks. Tulsi Gabbard went in there ready to attack Kamala Harris because she's in the second position. These other candidates are on the attack. Here's the one thing that reminds me of 2016, the difference between 2016 and now. The one thing the Democrats are getting right, the rest of the field, is they're all attacking Biden. They're all trying to take him down. I don't think it's going to work right now, but they're all attacking. Remember, in 2016, the Republican candidates did not attack Donald Trump. They were afraid, and only until the end, but they were afraid to attack Donald Trump. They only attacked each other. They knocked each other out of the game, and Trump was standing there, and they were afraid to go after him. They're not afraid to go after Joe Biden. They know that if they don't knock him down a couple notches within the next 2 months, I think it's going to be very difficult. I also think the DNC is on the brink of losing complete control over this primary. Yeah,
explain this to us. This is an important point. Everybody has to listen to what Reince is saying.
Right. Once these candidates start to fade off, once the field starts to narrow, it takes nothing. If CNN wants to do a debate every single night with 7 of these candidates, they can get 3 times the viewership. So if you're at 1% in Iowa, say we're all at 1% in Iowa, Laura's at 30% in Iowa. Why would we not have a debate every night on CNN, the 3 of us, to try to catch up with you? And the reason why the DNC needs to get control is that these 19, 18, 15 candidates are going to go on their own. They're going to go rogue. And this is about to break loose. And I think you're seeing this starting tonight.
Byron, interesting. I like the intrigue, the palace intrigue at the DNC. DCC is having trouble, too. Go ahead.
Well, this is the last time you're going to see most of these candidates on stage in a debate. The rules change the next time. Right. You have to qualify for the debate, at least 2% in the polls, either nationally or in a number of state polls. Right now, 6 or 7 members of
who falls out after tonight? Let's get some predictions. Who falls out?
The bottom dozen fall out.
Yeah, but who in the bottom? Who right now do you think is not going to make it?
The ones who stay in are the top 4: Bernie, Biden, Harris, Warren, and Booker, maybe, and Buttigieg, and that's about it. The rest of them are going away because they will not qualify.
But your point is that they could. Yeah, but your point is that they could still pop up on CNN, right? Because CNN needs.
So what is to stop 10 of these candidates? Say they get knocked out. What's to stop those 10 from doing a debate on CNN?
Because DNC have also ran.
But the DNC has not. They have not tied the debate calendar to the nomination process. They have not tied.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
To the rules of the nomination. So it is a free-for-all. There is nothing preventing candidates from doing their own thing.
Dennis Kucinich, you and I talked about this before this show began. I keep thinking of the guys who were and it could be guys or gals, but who were just master campaigners. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, George W. Bush. They were, I mean, not just because they won, but they were phenomenal, just retail politicians. Who on that stage tonight, other than Biden, has that kind of common touch? He can be a little self-deprecating. Yeah, he can slur his words every now and then. But, you know, I don't think anyone cares about that. Who comes close to being a retail politician with some pizzazz? I didn't see it. And I mean, I was trying to just look at it as an analyst. I did not see that kind of Obama, Trump, go get it. I didn't see it.
Well, it's still early.
Marianne Williamson, maybe, but she wasn't with us.
It's still early in the campaign, and I think that you can't get elected to some of the office these people hold without having some skill at retail. But I also think that I would be very careful to write anybody off right now. While it's true that presence in a debate can determine if somebody's going to be visible to the American people, there's still a lot of movement, I think. And tonight, I think you picked it up, Tulsi Gabbard, for example. That exchange that you had with Senator...
It shows her vulnerability, Kamala Harris's vulnerability.
Well, she's good on offense.
If you can't answer Tulsi Gabbard, and I like Tulsi Gabbard, but if you can't answer her, you think you're going to go toe-to-toe with Trump? I don't think so.
A prosecutor is good on offense, and she's good on offense. But Senator Harris didn't do well on defense today.
Now, Harmeet, Democrats have a new phrase for we can't answer or don't want to answer this question. Watch.
We should stop using Republican talking points in order to talk with each other about how to best provide that health care.
Jake, your question is a Republican talking point.
We cannot keep with the Republican talking points on this. You got to stop.
Open borders is a right-wing talking point.
I mean, that's a cute trick, Harmeet, isn't it? But old
no,
Castro is up.
Lame.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lame when you hear it again and again. And what they don't like is the Republican reality outside that room, the reality that Donald Trump has been the best president ever for criminal justice reform, which is something they purport to care about, for African-American jobs, for education, for a rising tide for all Americans, and for everything in our economy. And so they don't like those facts. They are painting and conjuring this picture of this dystopian America where the seas are rising and we are shivering in huddles in cages on the streets. And none of that is really true. So I think it's not working. It's very fake. I mean, Laura, I think you're pointing to this. Most of these candidates are totally fake. Kirsten Gillibrand, thanks for playing, but go into Ohio and white-splain whiteness to white women. I mean, what is that? It's crazy. So I think you're right. Biden is the only one who was authentic, but he's got his own problems. I actually think he improved vis-a-vis the last debate. And Harris is going to go down in the polls after her performance.
Now, this was a nightmare for Harris tonight.
Yeah.
This was a nightmare. We haven't even gotten to the trade stuff, what happened on immigration. Castro just completely embarrassed himself on immigration. But, Reince, to that point about how now Biden positions himself going into this next debate, because I think he rose above the cacophony of all this. I mean, he was up there defending Obamacare. All the rest of the people are like trashing Obamacare.
Which isn't a great place to be either with the American people.
Well,
so
it's fairly popular.
It's better than Green New Deal and Medicare for All. But here's the issue, and Harmeet hit on it, which is the problem that Democrats have is all these positions, Green New Deal, Medicare for All, reparations, 100% job security, mandatory paid vacation, is how does that play out in Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, Columbus, Cleveland? What do those people think of those positions? And it doesn't work. You're talking about, I think Cory Booker said something about the Paris Climate Accord being, the child's play. And I think
it's a no-brainer. Giving away your sovereignty.
And I think President Trump said it well when he announced it in the Rose Garden when he said, we're about Pittsburgh, not Paris. Trump wins that argument every single day. So they can have their debate, as Byron opened up. They can have this esoteric debate. But in the end, it's the positions of this president that is going to help him win in the Midwest. And these positions are going to kill the Democrat Party.
Byron, it's a lot of money we're talking about. We're talking about trillions upon trillions of dollars. They're also saying welcome everyone into the country. Anyone who wants to come in, basically, when you boil it all down, anyone can come in for any reason, except maybe if you're a murderer, then we don't really want you here. But other than that, if you show up, you're going to stay. So we're going to all die in 12 years. Climate change, rising seas, Flint, Michigan, segregation in the 70s, relitigating busing. This just seemed a total disconnect from what you, Dennis Kucinich, have talked about your whole life. Reince Priebus is from the Midwest. The Rust Belt, the Midwest, is still where this election is going to be won or lost, in my view.
Last night was a more progressive crowd, and on immigration, remember in the previous debate, and they all basically raised their hands and said they were in favor of decriminalizing illegal crossings of the border. Last night was just completely progressive. Tonight you did have somebody, Joe Biden, say that, you know, it's illegal to cross the border illegally. But he is not in the majority here, and this is... All of this is going to be on the record. So they've basically all come out and said we are in favor of effective open borders. They can try to change that when the general election comes around, but we've already seen it.
Yeah, later on we're going to get to how de Blasio 3 times tried to take out Joe Biden on the issue of immigration. He went 3 times a bite at the apple on deportations, which again, Dennis, I know you're more progressive than some of these Midwest, more centrist Democrats. But you still have to put together that electoral map. How do you put the electoral map together when it's basically, Republican talking about it or not, open borders, endless spending, guaranteed incomes, reparations, Green New Deal, Medicare for all?
Well, I would present it in a different package. I would say Medicare for all, mandatory. The Democrats ought to stand for that, and I think they can win on that. I also think you win on jobs and wages and pensions.
99% of America has seen a wage increase. The Wall Street Journal piece today was devastating on that. 99% of the 99% of Americans have seen their wages basically go up. Big screaming headline in the Journal today.
Well, the question is by what degree, and that's something that
better than Obama.
And look, I'm not arguing about the Obama administration here versus the Trump administration. I'm speaking in a relative sense about whether or not there's hope for particularly working class people in Ohio who have been shut out of a lot of the gains in the economy.
Does anyone on that stage really think, Harmeet, that they're going to do a better job at creating jobs than Donald Trump, or they're going to do a better job at health care reform than Barack Obama? I don't see it. I think that's a hard argument to make with this economy.
Where the jobs are created is rebuild the infrastructure. That's something the Democrats.
Yeah, well, the Democrats don't want to do the infrastructure because you can't work with someone who they say is a racist.
That was a mistake.
Harmeet, I just think they're arguing against this economy. Castro was arguing that this is not a good economy tonight. That's ridiculous.
Well, that's right. I mean, they have nothing to complain about if they were going to talk about the facts here. They have to, demonize the president, which is, getting very tired. It isn't talking about solutions for Americans. And they have a completely altered view of reality. On the one hand, everybody from other countries can come into the country and stay here. On the other hand, the taxpayers are going to pay for it with what money? And so I think that they really failed at that. And when it comes to Donald Trump getting up against any of these, I can't wait to see that. And we're not going to see it, as many of the other guests have pointed out tonight. Most of these people are, going to take their consolation prize and go for the most part. But I don't see how any of them are going to do better than Trump at a lot of the issues they talked about, at immigration. I mean, Biden, who was the leading candidate there, he took some hits for the fact that his administration had deported many
we
more
want to get to
people
that.
than
Hold
Donald
on,
Trump
Harmeet, because
did.
I want to get to what I just mentioned. When hitting Biden, other 2020 Dems also piled on the president Obama's legacy. Watch.
When the issue came up of all those deportations, you were vice president of the United States. I didn't hear whether you tried to stop them or not, using your power, your influence in the White House.
The president came along, and he's the guy that came up with the idea, first time ever, of dealing with the Dreamers. To compare him to Donald Trump, I think, is absolutely bizarre.
I don't hear an answer from the vice president.
He moved to fundamentally change the system. That's what he did.
Mr. Vice President, you can't have it both ways. You invoke President Obama more than anybody in this campaign. You can't do it when it's convenient and then dodge it when it's not.
Reince, who won the better of that one? It is true that President Obama had a lot of deportations, so now the conclusion is Obama was too conservative for this Democrat Party.
Yeah, I think it's a tough sell in the Democrat Party right now, and that's why Biden's 20 points up. I mean, I think the party has to be very careful here I think that the party and me and others it's easy for us to dismiss this entire field as completely wacko, but the one guy that's not necessarily in that category is plus 20 over the rest. So I think it's important for the party to focus in on Joe Biden, talk about the fact that he's for the Green New Deal. He came out in favor of it, $93 trillion. I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that. And I think that Barack Obama is far too popular still within the Democrat base. It's much different than Bush in 2008 and 2010 when you had Cruz and Mike Lee and everyone, just running from
well, 55% of Americans, Democrats,
is different.
55% of Democrats today want to continue Obama's legacy.
Right.
So they're up there trashing Obama.
It's a dangerous deal.
I do not think that Biden completely laid to rest concerns about his age, about his sharpness. There was enough haltingness in his performance, enough difficulties in formulating ideas that I don't think this is going away, and age is going to be a problem from now on for him.
I would have to agree with Byron to the extent that the vice president seemed to interrupt himself a few times, and that he broke the flow of his own presentation, which didn't help him. I also think that Cory Booker did a pretty good job in putting the vice president to the test.
I mean, why is Cory Booker not really catching on? I mean, he's fairly articulate. But we were arguing Newark police policy. At one point, we were arguing NYPD. Then we were arguing Newark. Then we were arguing. It seemed like we're not saying it's not important, but as for a Democrat primary, it seemed very, really, really granular. I don't think. Again, I think most of it went over people's heads.
Well, even if you don't get down into the granular aspects of it, I do think Biden laid a couple of good blows on him with respect to how he had lied and how the ACLU had accused Booker of, et cetera. But I think the point is he comes across, even like if you turned off the volume and just looked at the body language, he comes across as very kind of shrill, hyper, in your face. We saw that in the Kavanaugh hearings. We've seen that in virtually all of his performances. They're all up at 11, and this is Spinal Tap. They're like just one note, and it's just too much. And people don't want that. I think they want a Biden who's functioning. I think that's the problem is that, Biden, the halting and like the kind of mini stroke type situation. I think that was very discomforting to watch. It was very difficult to watch.
All right, Harmeet, panel, thank you for joining us. Reince, Byron, and Dennis, please stand by.